There's something strange about life that almost all of us fall into, especially once we reach our 40s. We become incredibly confident in predicting things that we can never actually be certain about. It's not because we lack experience. If anything, we have more than ever. It's because life has its own mischievous rhythm. It gives us this warm sense of, I've got it figured out, only to show us the very next moment that things are still more fragile than we want to admit. Have you ever looked back at an earlier version of yourself and wondered, why did I believe everything would go exactly as planned? It wasn't naivete. It was simply that certainty has a very seductive charm. It feels like a warm light shining from a house window on a snowy night, inviting, steady, comforting. We see that light and we convince ourselves that if we keep walking toward it, we'll be safe. And in that desire for stability, we forget that the world outside that window is still vast, unpredictable, and full of things we cannot control. There's an American saying, certainty is comfort, uncertainty is reality. And it's a truth many of us don't fully grasp until later in life. Understanding it is one thing, facing it is another. A lot of people between 40 and 60 tell me the same thing. The world feels like it's shifting under their feet. Technology leaps forward. Industries change overnight. What felt guaranteed 10 years ago now exists only as a memory. And in that swirl of change, we naturally reach for the familiar. A job, a routine, a belief, a plan, anything that makes us feel anchored again. Ironically, the moment we need certainty the most is usually when it slips away fastest. I once heard a story about a man who worked the same job for 25 years. His life ran on a steady rhythm, waking at 6 a.m., breakfast with his wife, driving the same old car to the factory, clocking in, putting in an honest day's work, returning home. No drama, no chaos. Just a simple, dependable life. He believed it was secure, that it would last. Then one morning, the factory closed for good. Just like that, in a single announcement, everything he thought was permanent disappeared. He didn't talk much about losing the job. What he talked about was the shock, the feeling of realizing that for more than 2 decades, he had built his life on something he only assumed was certain. All of us have a factory like that, a place, a plan, a relationship, a financial cushion, a dream, something we quietly rely on, something we trust, something we believe won't change. And life, in its own unsentimental way, eventually asks, what will you do if this isn't as permanent as you think? But here's the part people often forget. When certainty collapses, life doesn't end. It simply calls us to look at reality with clearer eyes and walk forward with a little more wisdom. Some of the strongest people I've met say moments of uncertainty were the times they found themselves most clearly. When the ocean is calm, you can't see its depth, but when the waves rise, everything hidden beneath comes into view. And as we grow older, we become less afraid of those waves. We begin to understand they don't last forever, and neither does the calm. A woman from Seattle once told me that losing her job at 55 wasn't the hardest part. What scared her was the belief she'd had for years that by her 50s, life should finally be predictable. She laughed and said, I wanted to believe the turbulence was over, but life never agreed to that deal. And there's a wisdom in that laugh, a quiet acceptance. Certainty is like a promise life never actually signed, but we treat it as if it's written in ink. Because humans, no matter their age, income, or background, love the feeling of knowing what comes next. We want to believe we're in control. We plan, we schedule, we strategize, and we convince ourselves that if we prepare well enough, we can freeze the world into a shape we like. But that's just an illusion. A comforting illusion, yes, but still an illusion. The truth is that everything is always in motion. Sometimes the shifts are subtle. Sometimes they hit like a storm, but they are constant. And the sooner we accept that, the more peaceful our lives become. Not because we gain more control, but because we stop depending on control to feel grounded. The people who seem the calmest, the most resilient, the most alive, they're not the ones who are certain about everything. They're certain about one thing. Whatever happens, they will find a way to move forward. And maybe that is the only certainty we ever truly need.